Hello, thank you for joining us for another professional learning opportunity in our series of PD on inclusion developed by the Division of Special Education. This session focuses on supporting inclusive kindergarten classrooms from a behavioral perspective. There will be a resource handout provided following this recording to give you direct links to the videos and resources that are shared. It'll also provide you with contact information should you have any questions about the content presented. Our work today aligns with LA Unified's strategic plan, Eliminating Opportunity Gaps, Pillar 1, Academic Excellence. Our strategic plan calls for us to create learning environments that promotes inclusive education for students with disabilities to foster high expectations for academic, social, and vocational outcomes. We'll measure our success by 2026 when we increase the percentage of students with disabilities who are in general education programs at least 80% of school day to 80%. And this would be an increase from 58.8% in the 2020 to 21 school year. Our vision statement is we, the LAUSD community, intentionally design and deliver inclusive environments for students at every opportunity. Before we dive into our content today, let's take a moment to participate in a grounding activity. We invite you to follow along with our breathing activity to help us center before we begin our work. As we talk about inclusion, we want to make sure we're all on the same page, and to help us, we'll watch a quick video by Shelly Moore.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelly Moore. Today's topic is the evolution of inclusion. Okay, so you remember the dots? I know. I've shown you these before. But one colleague of mine suggested to me once, he goes, what if we didn't look at these as different concepts that we compare to each other, but instead as an evolution of time? It was totally brilliant. Now we could look at this timeline through the lens of any marginalized population, but to understand this timeline from the inclusion and disability perspective, we have to go back in time a little bit. Many of us know or are connected to someone who experienced institutionalization. It was even recommended to families by doctors. Although British Columbia was the first province in Canada to close down their institutions, there are still individuals living in these conditions across Canada today. The institutionalization movement is an example of exclusion. It separated individuals with disabilities from their families without choice. But the disability rights movement over the past 50 years, with the hard work of some incredible self-advocates and families, and maybe a little help from Geraldo Rivera, pushed communities to shift so that individuals of all abilities were welcomed and living in the same settings as their family and friends. This shift from institutions to communities, this was the start of the inclusive evolution. We have movement, but can we do better? Although many individuals are no longer excluded from their families and communities, they were, and let's be honest, they still are, expected to attend segregated schools or self-contained special education programs that are totally separate from the rest of the school community. And so parents started to ask some very good questions. You see, children with disabilities have siblings without disabilities, and families wanted all their kids to have equitable access to community-based education together. Kids started to be integrated into classrooms with their peers. They're in math together. They're in gym class together. They're eating lunch together. Kids are together. This is better. The shift from segregated to integrated schools and classrooms, this is the next step in the evolution of inclusion. We have movement, but can we do better? Well, this is where things get tricky, because integration, it doesn't take long to realize that just being together, it's not enough. Although in the same classroom, students with disabilities are often just that. They're physically in the classroom. They may sometimes have parallel activities, but mostly it's loosely connected classroom tasks. Now, you don't need me to tell you that just physically sharing space and time is enough to make you feel like you belong in a community. I mean, come on, there are Disney movies made about this. Breathing the same air is not enough. Do you remember the Titans? I do. The evolution from integration to inclusion is now the topic of many conversations in communities and schools around the world. How do we support individuals to be meaningfully included and not just physically integrated? It's not just about where kids go in their day, but why. What is the purpose to the places that they go? It's now school-based teams and staff that are asking questions about how to do this. How can we support purposeful and meaningful placements for kids with disabilities? In inclusive classrooms and schools, students aren't just present, but they have roles and responsibilities in their classrooms and also meaningfully connecting to their peers. This is inclusion. So there you have it, my friends. A brief history of inclusion in about 5 minutes. If this is interesting to you, though, definitely investigate your local history as well, because every community is in a different place in this journey, and it's so valuable to know where we've come from. The other thing, though, is looking at these visuals as a timeline. It really helped me to shift my own thinking from which bubble am I at or not at, and shift to more about where are we now in our inclusive journey and what's our next step. All of a sudden, the goal of inclusion becomes action-oriented and just feels so much more possible. We may not all be at the same place in the journey, but we can all move forward. We can do better. And so this is the question I'm going to leave you with today. Can we still do better? Do you think there's another evolution in inclusion? What might that be? How can we inch even more forward to make inclusion even better? Thanks, Geraldo.
We hope that you enjoyed the short clip by Shelley Moore. If it was your first time viewing it, we hope that it provides you with a historical perspective and gives you context for why inclusion is so important as we move forward. Ms. Moore shared with us that we can look at inclusion through a lens of any marginalized population, and thinking about those experiences in the context of exclusion, moving to segregation, then attempts at integration, and ultimately towards inclusion. We think this is a very powerful perspective and can serve as a foundation for the work ahead. As we go through the different ideas and strategies, think about how the strategies work to ensure that all members of our school community have meaningful roles, responsibilities, and connections that foster success. By the end of today's presentation, participants will be able to describe behavior, understand that all behavior has a function, engage in effective planning activities to support students before they enter the classroom, and use reinforcement to promote expected behavior. Let's dive into some behavior basics. Behavior is anything that we say or do. For example, in this picture, we can see that the teacher and at least one other student is using their right index finger to point at the globe. We can see that all 5 students are looking towards the globe. We can see that the teacher is smiling along with at least one other student, and if this were a video, we might hear students talking or discussing what they see. Those are all behaviors. What other behaviors do you see in this picture? Feel free to pause the video and note any behaviors that you see. Now that we have a common understanding of what behavior is, we can talk about the next important step, that behavior is learned and strengthened through a process of reinforcement. We have a short video clip here to illustrate this, and we'll talk about how it impacts your classroom in about 90 seconds.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you with.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I don't want
Behavior always has a reason, or serves one of 2 possible functions: to get something or to avoid something. In our diagram, we illustrate in green the options for when a behavior is used to get something. Think of a situation where a student might yell at the top of their lungs. That yell might be to get attention from adults or peers. Perhaps it's to get a specific toy, or it could be related to a sensory need. That same student screaming could also serve the purpose of avoiding something undesirable, illustrated in red on our diagram. Perhaps the student yells to get away from a peer or adult, or perhaps to avoid doing a non-preferred activity such as independent math work, or to avoid an undesired sensory-related issue. Understanding the function or purpose of a student's behavior is our first step to addressing our students' needs. And now let's get into some good stuff. In our work as educators, we have a firm belief that behavior, especially behaviors that we find challenging, perhaps even disruptive and sometimes dangerous, can be changed. After all, we are teachers. To guide us in putting our knowledge of behavior to work, we look at behavior through looking at what happens immediately before the behavior, or the antecedent, the behavior itself, and the consequence, or what happens immediately following the behavior. We call this the ABC contingency. Here's an example. Sam walks with his parents through a store. He sees a shelf with candy. He then jumps up and down, cries, and rolls on the ground. Basically throws a tantrum. His parents buy him candy, and he gets to eat them in the car. In this example, seeing the candy was the antecedent, the tantrum was the behavior, and getting candy was the consequence. How can we make this a teachable moment? Perhaps walking far, far away from the candy aisle may have prevented the tantrum. Alternatively, if he already saw the candy, Perhaps we have to teach him a different way of asking for candy, such as asking politely. Remember, the function of the behavior was to get the candy, so our response will need to be sure that we are addressing that need. Now let's take a look at how the ABC contingency might work in our classroom.
She's scared to go Guana, and the other one's I'm coming. Go back over here. Stop doing that. It's on my shoulder.
In this short video clip, we can see a student playing with a truck. Eventually, he goes near his peers and sticks his tongue out at them. When the behavior is ignored by peers, he reaches out to hit and scratch one peer. Determining the function of this student's behavior will help us address it appropriately. If we look at it through the lens of the ABC contingency, we can see our A, or antecedent, which was the student playing with a truck, and other students playing with other toys. The B, or behavior, is the student touching peers, and the C, or consequence, for the behavior appears to be peer attention, although we would really want to collect multiple points of data before truly making that determination. To address the function of the behavior, or access to peer attention, we would want to look at ways that we can teach this student, as well as his peers, how to get attention appropriately. Key takeaways from this behavior basics section of the training are remembering that behavior occurs to get or to avoid an activity, attention, or sensory input. We can alter what happens before and after a behavior, and we focus our teaching on the skills that we want students to gain as they relate to others and to the classroom. Finally, behaviors are learned and strengthened through reinforcement. Behaviors that meet the need will be strengthened, and you'll see more of those behaviors in your classroom, while behaviors that do not meet a student's need will be less likely to be repeated. So pay attention and give praise to students who exhibit behaviors that you want to see, and you will see more of those behaviors. Focusing on the strategies that allow the student to get their needs met in expected and contextually appropriate ways, students learn improved behavior and our classes will run smoother. Let's talk a little bit about setting the stage, or some antecedent interventions that we can put into place to plan in advance for student success. Let's think a little bit about the physical setup of our classrooms. Students will need to have different areas for different activities. Having distinct areas helps all students to understand classroom expectations and build some independence in the classroom. Having small group areas may support students with specific skill deficits. Posters or visuals may help students understand content as well as behavior a bit clearer. Independent workstations allow students to access manipulatives, and a computer station might help students understand that they can access online learning when they're in that area. And a cozy corner or a quiet space may help students to understand that when they're feeling overwhelmed, they can take a small break before they get back into their learning. When setting up your classroom, we want to create visual boundaries that will allow students to understand where specific activities occur in the classroom. This helps students to predict events and activities, anticipate changes, understand expectations, and make sense of their environment. Examples include specific areas for the classroom library, cozy corner or quiet space, centers, or individual workstations.
You can designate boundaries in your classroom in a lot of different ways. You can use covering, tape on the floor, or use furniture to create separate spaces in your classroom. Use what works for you. By providing visual supports, you're allowing students the freedom to understand the boundaries without having to think about it, and they can visually process and move on with the activities. These are a few examples of possible classroom setups. There is no single way to do it, so consider the following when thinking of your students' needs. Are students able to easily access the materials and supports they need? Can they see, without obstruction, important instructional areas? Can students and staff navigate the area easily? Some of the things that successful classroom setups have in common are plenty of space to maneuver between areas and students, designated areas for student activities, and clear expectations for each of those areas. Let's talk about how to set positive expectations in the classroom. Limiting your class to 3 to 5 expectations ensures that students can understand the expectations without being overwhelmed. Expectations should be stated positively and be observable. For example, when we say, "be kind," it may be confusing and very subjective for students and adults in the classroom. Instead, we might try something more specific, like help others in the classroom. We need to ensure that our expectations are developmentally appropriate. We want to make sure that we are placing the right amount of responsibility that is appropriate for the level of the students you teach. Finally, make your expectations visible. Post them in the areas that they apply so that all who access those areas can refer to them. It's important to make expectations in the classroom clear. We might assume that everyone knows what a quiet voice sounds like or what walking in line nicely looks like. However, you'll find in practice this isn't always the case. It's important to teach our students exactly what a quiet voice sounds like or what walking in line nicely looks like so that students can meet your expectations. Making visuals like the examples above and posting them in the classroom help to remind students of your expectations so they can demonstrate the expected behavior. Different areas of the classroom may require different sets of expectations. The expectations in a quiet zone may look very different than the expectations at the language arts small group. It's important that students are taught those expectations early so that they know what to do to be successful. During our live webinar version of this training, we had participants get into small groups and consider expectations in different areas of their classroom or their school building. We asked them to consider the broad ideas of be safe, be respectful, be responsible, and to clearly define a behavioral expectation along with the visual support to support student learning of that expected behavior. For this recorded training, we'll just go over one of these examples so that you can see the big ideas and what it takes to create clear behavior expectations. In this example, we consider expectations at the water fountain. For the broad idea be safe, we think that a good behavior expectation is that I keep my hands to my side and my feet on the floor, and you'll see the visual that illustrates that. For the big idea of be respectful, we like to teach students to wait patiently in line, and we have an example in the visual support in the column next to that. And for our last big idea of be responsible, we want students to keep water in the fountain bowl, and you'll see an image of a student demonstrate that expected behavior. Let's talk about schedules and how to use them in our classrooms. Think about our lives as adults navigating our day. What are some strategies we use to make sure that we're at the right place at the right time or prepared for those activities for the day? I think the majority of us use some sort of planner. whether it be a digital planner such as a Google Calendar or our Outlook calendars, or paper versions of lesson plan books or just paper calendars. Schedules help to alleviate stress by providing a visual of upcoming activities. They help to build independence and allow students to navigate parts of their own day. Schedules strengthen executive functioning skills and help students understand changes to the day and allow them to process those changes. As a teacher, you will probably use multiple schedules during the day. You may need one schedule for your daily activities to help students understand what's coming up for them. You may also have a schedule for recess rotations or centers during class. Those schedules help students understand and process expectations and upcoming events. Now let's talk about multimodal access, or how we can build in opportunities to present materials in multiple ways. Visual supports are an invaluable resource in the classroom. As we discussed, there is high value in expectations and schedules. However, it is equally important to consider a visual support to the information that we share. Oftentimes, our students with challenging behavior have difficulty in processing or accessing the information that is presented verbally, or just in print. So including a visual representation that we can use while teaching helps to improve their access to the information that you are sharing. Consider these above. A teacher is reviewing the schedule for the day with students and can present that information orally and directly reference the visual representations on the board. In the small group centers example, students have written instructions on what is expected of them in the center. These written directions are also supplemented with picture supports so that all students can access and understand the individual steps that are expected of them. These examples of multimodal representations show that teachers are able to do two things at once, which helps to increase access for all students in the classroom. Some students may not be able to access all of the amazing schedules, expectations, or other visual supports you have put in place in the classroom. So let's talk about how we can create individual supports for specific students in the classroom that may need a little more structure. Individualized schedules allow us to put together schedules that may help a student get through the whole day, or maybe just a particularly challenging part of the day. Individualized schedules may look like a to-do list where students can check off completed activities, or it may look like a visual schedule where students move icons or realia to different areas to indicate that one activity is complete and another is about to begin. The first then schedule may be used for students who are still learning independence or who need smaller chunks connected to specific reinforcement. The example here says first circle time, then snack. The student is expected to participate in circle time and then can expect that snack will follow. Oftentimes the structure of this for teachers looks like first work with a specific task that's within the student's range, then followed by a reinforcement. The schedule on the right allows the student to see what a chunk of their day will look like. You might use a schedule like this to show morning or afternoon chunks of the day, and students who are overwhelmed looking at the whole day may benefit. This example shows a list of activities that are coming before recess. This is another example of an individual schedule. You can see for Isabel, she has 3 tasks that are presented before a specific reinforcing activity is accessed. So Isabel will complete science and a worksheet and adapt a book, and then she'll be able to get Legos for her break. This type of individual schedule can be small and kept discreetly for those older students who don't want other people to know that they have an individual schedule working with them. Now let's take a look at teaching in action. let's consider the way that our adult behaviors, or the way that we teach expectations or create reinforcing activities for our students, impact accessibility to our classrooms. Let's watch a quick video. Pay close attention to the actions and behaviors of adults and the resulting behaviors of the students.
Hey, Mr. Q.
Did you see that? Why would somebody do that?
Please go into the classroom, no talking, quietly.
Hey, Miss Meredith, how you doing?
We need you inside.
How do you think that makes us feel?
I forgot my number.
What's your name?
Jordan?
What's your last name?
Carter?
All right. Go ahead.
School is hard enough.
Come on in, sit down quietly at your desks, and begin writing.
This kind of stuff just makes it harder.
I said quietly, please. Who's talking? Is it you, Sophie? Don't let it be you.
Don't believe me?
Sophie.
Please just watch.
I'm not up here for me, I'm up here for you. Pay attention, okay? Now somebody answer me. Somebody needs to answer me really fast.
Every time we're ignored or yelled at or silenced, a teacher takes away what's possible.
No horseplay, no running, and especially no talking.
Moment by moment.
Miss McGarity, your student's behavior yesterday in the lunchroom, it was terrible. Next time, silent lunch.
Did you hear that? Stay in line and catch a bubble. I'm not playing.
If this is education, we're in trouble.
Bye, Miss McGarity.
Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. The way it is now, 2 of the 3 of us will never be able to really read. It doesn't have to be this way.
Hey, Jordan. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Everyone we meet throughout our day can make a difference.
I've been waiting for you to arrive.
All the difference.
Good, how are you?
Great.
Hi, Jordan. Bye, Jason.
Good morning, Jordan.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good.
Go ahead and put your number in.
Talk with us, not at us.
That's okay. I'll look it up for you. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay.
All right. Have a
Teach us what we need to know. That's how we get smarter.
Well, good morning, Sophie, Janicia, and Jordan.
And when you talk with us and teach us, give us bigger and bigger words.
Now what I'd like you to do, children, is turn around and converse with your neighbor and discuss where the mother might have gone.
Words that we can use to read and understand.
She is prey for eagles, so she hunts at night.
And that will take us places we could never reach without you.
Remember, we're entering the learning zone. Now, how can we show our respect to the children and teachers who are working?
We can walk quietly.
Yes. Okay, kids, so what I'd like you to do is continue writing your narrative, documenting your emotions if you were the baby owl and your mother abandoned you in the nest.
What can you do? Learn all that you can so that you can challenge us to be our best.
You would have stayed and assisted them in whatever they needed.
Share yourself with us and show us how to share ourselves with others. Give us courage. Give us compassion. Help us find our own voices so we can become who we are meant to be.
Why would you want to silence us?
We hope that you enjoyed the ending of that video, and I know it's a lot to process. In our live webinar version of this training, we had a quick discussion with our participants, and we really honed in and had the participants take a look at what was different between the first and the second half of the video, really focusing in on the adult behaviors. We're going to dive into some of the adult behaviors in the next couple of slides. In considering adult behaviors and how that may impact student behavior, we want to talk about 3 big bucket items. The first being kinesics, or our nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is a large part of the way that we communicate, and we want to make sure that our body language communicates messages as they are intended. The other topic we want to discuss is paralinguistic communication, not just what is said, but how it is said. And also, we want to talk about making sure that as we communicate expectations, we start to learn to make start requests rather than stop requests. Let's dive into these topics. When considering nonverbal communication, we want to consider our body language, our posture, and our movement. Our body language says a lot about how we're feeling or how students interpret how we might be feeling. So if we approach a student with our arms crossed and my brows furrowed, what kind of message does that convey? I might even say something fairly kind or neutral, but my body language will communicate something very different. We also want to consider posture. Are we standing over the student, or are we intentionally or unintentionally posturing as if we're trying to intimidate the student? Lastly, when we consider our body movement, are we moving at a quick pace with some urgency, or are we moving super slow? How might our body movements might be interpreted by our students? Sometimes it's not the words that we say, but how we say them. We want to consider our tone, the volume and pitch, and the cadence, or the speed at which we speak. Let's take a look at this statement, and we're going to say this a couple of times with different tones and volumes, and see if you interpret each one of them differently. So our statement here is, come here and sit down in your seat. 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 When considering those different ways of saying the exact same statement, did they bring upon a different sense of how I might respond behaviorally? One effective consideration for adults in the school setting is to focus on start statements. Start statements tell students what the expected behavior is for this setting, rather than what you don't want to see. So in this situation here, where a child or children may be running down the hallway, a stop statement would be, stop running in the hallway. A start statement would be, we walk safely in the hallway. Both are intended to address the challenging behavior, but only one tells the student exactly what they should be doing in that setting. As we shared in our behavior section, reinforcement is a powerful component that helps motivate students to engage in behaviors. We're going to discuss some evidence-based practices to help increase the rate of expected behavior through the use of reinforcement. Through this process, we will build student self-esteem, build motivation, and help boost character development so that students can engage in expected behaviors in the classroom setting. Reinforcement is an important part of teaching expectations. We talked earlier about using specific schedules, like our first end schedule, that connected a desired task with a reinforcer to increase the rate of completing a desired task. We can do something logically similar class-wide. In these reinforcement examples above, you'll see that the teacher has listed specific behaviors on the jar or on that menu presented above. When the behaviors are seen, the teacher reinforces them by providing the specified number of marbles or quiet critters to the jar. When the jars are filled, the class earns a class party. Here are additional examples of class-wide reinforcement. You'll notice one on the left. This one, it looks like geared for older students working in table groups, and The students are working to specific reinforcement. You'll see on the bottom it says computer time, a movie, pizza party. The teacher has this set up where it looks like they earn little Metro cards for each time they exhibit a particular behavior. And I can assume that when the students collect enough Metro cards that gets them to their destination of the reinforcement, that's what they've earned. Star jar in the middle looks like an adaptation of the marble jar that we shared earlier. And lastly, it looks like an example that might be very appropriate for our younger students is that it looks like they're working to build a monster. And you can see the monster in that photo. Each time they meet a particular behavior goal, they earn a part of the monster. And it says on there, we are working for, and it looks like dance party. So what I can take from it looks like the teacher is working with the students to build that monster. And once the monster is built, they will earn a dance party. And to build a monster, this class needs to demonstrate expected behaviors. Those behaviors that you are giving the most attention to in your classroom are the ones that students are going to engage in the most. So please plan ahead and decide what behaviors you want to see so you know where you should be focusing your attention. For the last part of our training today, we want to discuss situations where children may present challenging behaviors due to difficulty in processing information presented or accessing the classroom curriculum. In LA Unified, we follow the principles of universal design so that all in the classroom may benefit and increase their access to learning. As we consider universal design, we are considering the physical space, the procedures, and the supports available to ensure that all who encounter an area can achieve success. Take this train station as an example. You see that there are stairs that lead up to the loading platform. There's a handrail to support some of the train riders as they access the stairs to get on the train. And there's also yellow safety markers to increase the safe access to the area. But notice that one of the customers has injured their knee, making their access very difficult because of the injury. What might we consider to assist the customer so that he can access the train? One solution might be to build a ramp with a reduced incline. This will make it safer for the passenger with the injured knee to access the platform without having to use his crutches on the stairs. But wait, is he the only person that might benefit from having a ramp? Would a teacher that has a cart full of new supplies from a back-to-school sale benefit? How about a delivery person using a hand truck to haul boxes? As you can see, with universal access in mind, providing a ramp increases access to a number of individuals, not just the person with the injury. This is true in our classrooms. When we design with the strengths and needs of all of our students in mind, we can create supports that benefit all. We encourage you to visit MyPLN and search for UDL, or Universal Design for Learning trainings put on by the Division of Special Education. These trainings will assist you in developing accessible units and lessons that engage all learners, provide multiple means for the learner to access the content, and provide your learners with choices of how they can show what they've learned. Thank you for joining us today. Please be sure to review the resource handout that we have provided as it shares links to the major ideas presented today, as well as direct links to other resources that will support you and your students. We want to call out resources from the Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports Restorative Practice, PBISRP team, that can be found using the Schoology group code found on the resource page. The vast majority of ideas that we've shared today are not unique to students with disabilities. In fact, these are strategies that can support any learner. Please be sure to visit their Schoology page for resources that will uplift the learning experience for all of your students. Thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at spedbehaviorsupport@lausd.net.